Okay, cool. Let's get started. First, important question. How many of you already know what Touhou Doujin music is? Okay, awesome.
So there's a song called Bad Apple.
All right. So because this is being recorded, might as well do a spiel anyway. Some of you who do not already know what Touhou is might nonetheless be familiar with this. This is, of course, a music video for a song called Bad Apple, which is an arrangement of a song called Bad Apple from a game called Lotus Land Story in the Touhou series project. This song, or rather the music video, was actually not made by the person who arranged the song, which is part of something called a circle called Ultrameria Records. This was actually a result of some people on a video sharing site called Nico Nico Dolga. Somebody had uploaded a video saying, with like some very, very, very rough storyboards, saying this would be a really cool music video if somebody made this for this song. And then people, made various responses to that video, and eventually they sort of combined those ideas, and this is what somebody came up with, and it now has almost 100 million views. All right, there you go.
Yeah. It's hard. Once he gets going, it's hard to get him to stop going. He's like a freight train.
Well, hey, we got a lot to talk about and not a whole lot of time, so you gotta go. So how about this one? This is a song called Tiny Little Adiantum from an album called Touhou Bossa Nova 2 by another circle called Shibayan Records, which we will also discuss during this panel. This is, of course, as it would suggest, a Bossa Nova song, but this is popular. Some of you might be more familiar with it in another form, however. Unfortunately. Yeah. So this is, of course, a bootleg remix of Tiny Little Adiantum called Omae wa Mou by a guy calls himself Deadman Shinjin, which is not actually like a word in Japanese. Somebody should tell him. And the GIF is not actually from Touhou. It's from an anime called Nonnon Biori, or rather the character is. I'm told it is a good anime. I should watch it someday.
It is.
But anyway, these are just some very popular things that have come out of the Touhou Doujin music scene, that have broken out of containment, that people know about even if they don't know, in some cases, what the hell a Touhou is. So let's break it down for people. What is Touhou? What is Doujin? What is music? First of all, what is Touhou?
First of all, who are we?
Who are we? We can introduce ourselves later. It doesn't matter. We're here for Touhou music. All right, if you want to do an introduction, you can do an introduction.
My name is Justin, also known as Zero Justice 315 online. I am just a Touhou fan of a very long time. There were several off and on periods in college and so on where I literally would play League of Legends and listen to Touhou music in the background instead of doing homework and studying, like as you do. This was kind of just a good 13 to 15 years of listening to Touhou music, and then last fall at a con called Anime USA, we decided to try out this panel.
Yep. I'm Nate, also KBNet online. Some of you in various places might also know me as Shunafuten, but I have also been into Touhou and the Touhou Doujin music scene for a long time, since 2011. Since MAGFest actually asked us for our qualifications when submitting this panel, my only real qualification is that I wrote a bunch of articles for a site called By Doujin. How many of you have actually heard of By Doujin? Okay, cool. Got some real people out here. So yeah, they were a really cool service while they lasted. If there's interest, I'll talk about them later. But that's my only really real qualification. I got to shoot some questions to some people of the Touhou Doujin music scene, bug them about stuff that I thought was interesting for like articles and stuff. Does that make me qualified? No, I don't know. Some of you probably know more about some aspects of the scene than I do, but I do care a lot about the subject. I can muddle through Japanese sources pretty good. So let's get on with it. Okay, first of all, what is Touhou? Answer, this. This is Touhou. This is Touhou Yoyomu, the 7th game in the Touhou Project overall, and the 2nd for the Microsoft Windows platform. The first 5 were for something called the PC-98, which is an architecture that was based off of the Intel x86 platform. And the first 2 of these Touhou Project games, they came out in 1997 at the same Comic Cats. But one predates the other, and that was Highly Responsive to Prayers. It was developed first. That was a Brick Break clone. This is not a Brick Break clone. This is Bullet Hell. Oh, I didn't save the English name. Perfect Cherry Blossom. Right. Okay. Got that settled. Yeah, so is a bullet hell game. The gameplay loop is you basically read these very dense, very sophisticated, I dare say sometimes beautiful patterns of bullets and lasers, and you try to figure out where are the blind spots, where are these patterns least dense, how is it safest to navigate. Why are we not getting more sound out of this? Yeah, we did, I know that.
Oh.
Here we
a lot
go.
of volume controls.
Anyway, good enough. Bullet hell game, very fun games. Classics of the genre, alongside things like Ikaruga and all the cave shooters. But unlike those, the Touhou Project series is an indie game series. They're all made by one guy, Otaku Brain, better known by his moniker of Jun. But he spells it with a Z, so we English speakers, we say Zune, like the Microsoft MP3 player. And Zune, as I said, he does everything. He does the coding, he does the design, he does the writing, his wife, I'm given to understand, helps a little bit with the art these days, but almost all of the art, and most importantly, all of the music. He very much cares about the music. He once joked in an interview that what he really wanted to do is he wanted to be a video game composer, and he figured the easiest way to do that would just be to make the games themselves as well. He was like, joking about that. Some people took him a little bit too seriously about that. He does it as a hobby at first. He now does it full time, which technically, I guess, maybe makes it no longer Doujin. There is a little bit of discourse about that. But that is all you really need to know. The soundtracks are really cool. But in order to understand a little bit of the cultural context, should also explain a little bit about what these games are about. What are they about? Character at the bottom of the screen there, the red-white there. Her name is Hakude Reimu. She is a shrine maiden. She is the shrine maiden of the Hakude Shrine. The Hakude Shrine is in a place called Gensokyo. Gensokyo literally means something like Fantasia. It is an area of Japan that was sealed off from the rest of the world around the middle of the Meiji period, and a bunch of yokai live there. You know what those are, right? There's traditional Japanese monsters, and there are Western monsters there as well, and gods and fairies, and by the way, they're all anime girls. Very important to note.
Very large cast, a lot of names. There are the more recognizable ones, and then there are the ones that, come out, appear once and are never seen again. Yeah.
So regarding that cast. Hakude Reimu's job is she sort of tries to make sure that when problems occur, that they get resolved peaceably. The person at the top of the screen, her name is Saigyoji Yuko. She is a ghost, and she is causing a problem. The problem she is causing in this game is she is trying to collect all the spring from Gensokyo to make this giant magical cherry blossom tree bloom, unseal a spirit, try to figure out who it is. Just idle curiosity, essentially. And it is a bad idea because it annoys everybody else because it's May and there's still snow underground. What the fuck is going on? And so that's basically what sort of all these games are about. Somebody is causing some sort of weird problem, and the great thing about these games is that the antagonist from one game will show up in the next, not necessarily because they've had a change of heart, but just because they're the ones who are being annoyed this time.
I think TV Tropes has a trope called having tea with Cthulhu, and the reason for that is that a lot of these girls are like, from a very high point of view, the powers and the abilities they have kind of make them monstrosities.
Sorta.
But they are cute anime girls, so it's fine.
Absolutely. So yeah, all these things sort of come together, the music, the writing, the very charming, very funny, very cute games, fun gameplay loop, and it makes a lot of people want to make secondary works about it. Now, that brings me to my next point. What is doujinshi? What is the doujin part of a Touhou doujin music scene? Doujin culture goes back a very long time in otaku culture, basically Japanese nerd culture, asterisk. It's more complicated than that, but we have other things to do. And so it goes back before otaku was a word, as a matter of fact. As by way of example, say that you and I, Justin, we have an idea that we want to make a game about spaceship girls. And this shared desire to make this game, that makes us doujin. Doujin means like comrade. And so we come together and with us doujin to make a doujin circle to go make this game. And the game that we make, that's called doujinshi, the product of our doujin circle. And we take this game, our doujinshi, to a big in-person event like Comic Market, much better known as Comiket. Or if it's Touhou related, it might be Reitai Sai, or if it's music related, M3, and there are a bunch of these different events. But we will go there and we will sell it on physical media. If it's music CD, it will be like a CD, obviously, game if it's a DVD. And then secondarily, we might also consider selling it online, but the primary venue of activity are these in-person events. And moreover, it's important that we're doing this as hobbyists. We're not trying to make a profit out of it. The doujin scene is not really set up so that you can make a profit, so if you're doing this, you're doing it wrong anyway. But you're doing it essentially as a hobby. And if you know the word doujinshi, you probably associate it with fan works. You might associate it with something else as well, but we're not going to talk about that tonight.
Those are also fan works.
Yeah, but doujinshi did not always mean fan works. That is an innovation that came around in the 80s with something called the parody boom. There was some discourse about that back in the day, ancient times discourse. But the Touhou, for instance, is not a derivative work, but it was a doujin game. It still is, honorarily at least. But everything we're going to be talking about today is derivative works. Okay, so we understand what Touhou is, we understand what doujinshi is. What is music? I'm just going to assume you have a good enough idea of what music is that we can skip this one.
So what do you think it is particularly about Touhou? Why do so many fans create works of Touhou specifically? Because there are a lot of fandoms, there are a lot of Japanese media properties, and I have some opinion myself, but just to get the ball rolling, like Touhou has the most music, like for a fandom. Like it has the reason we're doing this panel is because it has everything, and it's you have the Touhou killer, quote unquote Touhou killers. You had Azur Lane, you had Kantai Collection, you have Nikkei and the new Chinese and Korean properties that are coming out, but none of them have to the same degree of fan work as Touhou does. And so I know some of that is partially because Zune does not mind it as much as some other companies might.
Yeah, to an extent. We're actually going to talk a little bit about this later, but yeah, let's actually save that for later, because that is the subject of a couple of different sections of the panel. So there are a couple of different ways you can answer this. You can talk about the musical qualities of the Touhou soundtracks. You can talk a little bit about the culture that is sort of built up around it, its self-perpetuating qualities. Anyway, yeah, you put, we know what Touhou, we know what doujin is, you know what music is, more or less. You put them together, you make Touhou doujin music. Music based off of these ideas from these Touhou soundtracks. Made by hobbyist musicians, mostly for sale at these in-person events. The focus is on albums rather than LPs or singles for the most part. What they call them in Japanese is arenji, which comes from the English arrangement. Some of these songs are arrangements in the sense that we would understand in English, but there's also something that came about in like the later 2000s, what they call in Japanese the Genkyoku Senmetsuke, which is sort of like the original track deconstruction trend that is more like just taking these musical ideas and running with them to the extent that they're not as recognizable. And we're going to be talking a lot about both of these things. In terms of what music they are making, it used to be said during the peak that for any genre you can think of, there is somebody making Touhou music of it. And there is good reason that people thought that. The Touhou doujin music scene covers a very broad gamut, but it does not cover it evenly, and it does not cover it completely. The Touhou doujin music scene is biased towards electronic genres, especially danceable electronic genres, and genres that you can make with just like an electric guitar and some synth patches. But it is the nature of doujin culture that it attracts people with these very niche interests. So you do get some interesting niche genres. Okay, so let's situate ourselves a little bit in the history. I'm going to give a quick overview, and then we're going to touch on some of the important parts individually. So periodization. The Touhou Doujin music scene begins really no earlier than 2003. Arguably, it doesn't truly exist until 2004, 2005, 2003 at the earliest. That's when people first started really publishing this stuff at these events. There are a couple of different sources for the initial cadre of people who were doing this. The scene expanded throughout the early 2000s, mostly by way of social connections. People would go to these events, they'd make friends, they'd bring their buddies in. Hey, do you want to make an album for this event? Oh, my buddies are going to have an album for this Leitai-sai here. I'm going to make an album too. And it sort of expanded that way, so that by 2006, there's a really big infrastructure already in place. And it's really from that point forward that we enter a boom period that is coextensive with the period where Touhou is super prominent in otaku culture. And if you were around at the time, you definitely know what that was like.
Even if you weren't a Touhou fan.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of these videos broke into mainstream popularity through 4chan, through just YouTube by itself.
Yeah, and that's just it. There were a few like really popular shitpost songs, essentially, with their attendant music videos that got really popular on these sites like Niku Niku Doga, the Japanese video sharing site, and also YouTube, which is mostly how we found out about this stuff, which happens at around the same time. The boom period is also when a lot of the variety enters the doujin music scene, and it extends really until about 2012, when we enter a little bit of a contraction period, both in the number of circles participating and in the amount of work that they are putting out. But Touhou does remain as a force that is sort of in the background, even as other things sort of supplant its dominance over otaku culture in general. And by the late 2010s, we enter a new era, an era defined by the expansion of the digital space as a primary arena for this doujin activity. People started sharing their music officially through things like Spotify and the iTunes store. Circles started making official YouTube channels and started getting more into these music videos and stuff. And by absolute terms, the Touhou Doujin music scene has never been more popular than it is now, which is sort of crazy to think about.
It was very interesting to be a Touhou fan and also have access to all of these music sharing sites like Spotify. And then the only way you could ever officially listen to it is if you knew someone who went to Comic Market or went to Akihabara and got these physical discs. That's the only way you could, quote unquote, officially, except in a few cases. And then now they kind of transitioned to the online space. Now, it happened before COVID, but COVID did push a few other circles to, do that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in detail a little bit later. So enough of me yapping. Let's situate ourselves a little bit in the culture. Let's go over some of the more popular songs. So Justin, what the hell is Marisa Soul the Precious thing?
Don't ask me.
Okay, so it is a song by Oasis. It is an arrangement of Alice's theme from Perfect Cherry Blossom, the game that we were seeing earlier. Alice is another magician character besides... I didn't actually introduce Marisa. What the fuck am I doing?
She's right there.
She is right there. That's Marisa. Give her a hand. Yeah. All right.
There we go.
I don't know. Marisa Soul the Precious thing is just a very fun, very chaotic song. Iconic music video. McDonald's now also making a fucking commercial.
If you haven't seen that, the Japanese McDonald's made a parody of this, which goes hand in hand with the Ronald McDonald You Unknown Was Her. That was very popular a long time ago, and it's kind of come and gone, but also I like this one because the precious thing is implied to be Alice's heart, which is very cute.
It's text. It's literal text. It's Amy is saying wait, what you stole? It was your heart, wasn't it? It's just hi. Yeah. That's true.
Of course.
Yep. Tierno's Perfect Math Class. you actually have anything to say about this one?
I mean, not anything is technical, but it is up there in the pantheon, which is why it's in this section specifically. It is like we saw on the title slide. Yeah, Dempa. I hope you like Dempa, but it is. Who is the singer for this specifically?
Oh, he is Siren.
Okay, but it also.
I have to admit, I'm not a huge Iosis fan. I respect Iosis, but I don't know a whole lot about them.
Just
Nico. There you go. That's it. Nico. Oh yeah.
This just, I think, also reached across to multiple different fans outside of the Touhou as well. I think there were even some like Suwako parody song about as well that came out of this. I forget.
If you're thinking about the Silver Forest song, that's a different thing.
Okay.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Help Me Eri by Coale. Different sort of a song. Vocals by Beat Mario, who is a figure who will come up a couple different times in this panel. He is good buddies with Zoom. He runs the Coale station for like semi-official YouTube channel. Real charismatic guy, and it is basically a popular song. We're going to talk a little bit about how this song evolved because of the story. This is a music video that was actually made very recently.
Last year.
Yeah.
And to give some context to like popularity, I mentioned before the panel started that Bad Apple has almost 100 million views. That's like, I kind of get that because that is like ubiquitous across the internet. But like for fans in the early 2010s and before then, like seeing any Touhou song with like 100,000 views was like kind of a big deal. And now this music video of a song that was popular a long time ago is already at, I think, 15 million views. And like, views on YouTube are much bigger than they were 10 years ago, but it still warms my heart to see the OGs being represented correctly. Especially this music video was incredible. Yeah. There was a Miku. There was a producer that did a Miku version with a extremely similar music video with the Vocaloid characters instead, and it's just the Vocaloid and Touhou do go hand in hand sometimes.
All right. Let's move on.
Wait, no.
You want to talk about this one?
Yeah,
okay.
You got to give the people what they want.
Okay. We are Japanese goblins. All right, so you put this one in. You talk about
this is a. I mean, this was popular a long time ago, and then I think TikTok brought it back into popularity.
Yeah, I'm given to understand that as well, but I'm not on TikTok, so I can't.
Me either. But I think just like with a lot of some old classic media, Zoomers got a hold of it, and they're like, the funny demon girl is singing.
Oh yeah, they did. All right. How about this one?
Yeah, this Akatsuki Records, the vocalist Stack and her brother Stack Bros, who they're a duo that make a lot of these songs. Stack and Stack Bros are one of the more prominent circles that are still around and have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Stack's voice is iconic, extremely powerful. She has a pretty good range, and Necromantic and Hani Pagada and a few of her other songs have gotten really popular even with some non-Touhou fans. And I think the work they put into it, even still to today, it's like a lot of circles, and we might talk about this in a little bit, but a lot of circles kind of burn bright, but they burned out real quick because they're not doing this for profit. It is a lot of work to make music and music videos like this, and then also sometimes translate them into English. And Akatsuki Records has been doing it for a very long time.
All right, there's a bunch of stuff we could talk about. I just really want to quickly touch on this one at the end. This is an arrangement of an arrangement of an arrangement. This is a MIDI piano roll file for a pull and create arrangement of You and Owen Was Her that got uploaded and called like Default, which is a completely unrelated composition. But this is also another one of those songs that got really famous, mostly with people who had no idea what they were looking at. It is actually one of the first things that I saw that introduced me to this stuff. It is actually sort of interesting. Anyway,
That's
enough of all
notes.
this. Is it in a meme review? Let's get back to it. Let's talk a little bit about the music of the Touhou games themselves, just real quickly, because it is relevant to both. It affects the music that is being arranged, the arrangements, and it is interesting in and of itself. So structurally speaking, there's not much to talk about in Touhou music. These are fairly short songs, usually no more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds of actual musical ideas. They have to get across their point fairly quickly. So what are these points? Well, first of all, let's talk about meter. There are plenty of songs in the Touhou soundtracks which are in 4/4 meter, but plenty of songs which are not. Zune likes 3/4 meter, for instance, and 6/4 meter. For instance, Yunosuke Akutagawa's Kappa, Candid Friend from Mountain of Faith, which is what you're hearing right now. It's a very identifiable, very waltz-like 3/4 meter song. The 1, 2, 3, like that. But he also really likes 5/4 meter. It is a good example of that from the second most recent game, Unconnected Marketeers. This is the long-awaited Omagatoki, and this is just a very nice 5/4 track. So it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. So Zune likes these songs that are in 3/4, 6/4, 5/4 meter. And there are a couple of songs that are just full on those meters throughout the entire length. But there are also plenty of songs which have like an introduction in that meter and then have a main part that is in 4/4. And the most notable one is also probably the most famous song from the Coale Project in general, You and Owen Was Her, which has this nice 6/4 intro. Very interesting rhythm to it. And then here we are just in the 4/4. 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody knows this. So why is this important? It's important because, if you might remember, there are plenty of circles in this scene that are doing danceable electronic music, and that is all in 4/4, almost all in 4/4. So you have to be able to adapt those musical ideas into different genres. Here is a power metal song, Sweet Dear Vampirix, by H-Style for the Circle Soundholic on the album Metallical Vampire. And this is arranging a song that has a very weird compound meter in the original, Luna Dial. And for that reason, there are not a whole lot of Luna Dial arrangements because people just don't know what to do with the compound meter. And they even interpret it as it's basically just like 6/4. And it works, and it goes back between 4/4 and 6/4 throughout the song. And this is something that you can pick up in these arrangements, the way that it handles these different meters. Speaking of meters, let's talk a little bit about rhythm. Zune really likes, for instance, when composing his melodies, the tresillo rhythm, which is da, 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 da. And that's sort of like a very salsa-y rhythm. And you heard an example of that earlier, actually. That was Yuyuko's theme. Da, 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 da. Kind of like that. That is a tresillo rhythm. You and Owen Was Her is sort of a tresillo rhythm adapted into 6/4, and one of my very favorites, Yokai Tera Yokoso, which is a similar idea in 5/4, and I just really love the rhythm in this one. And there are a bunch of things that I could talk about here in terms of the music, but we don't got all day. If you want to know more about this, there are people who made it their hobby to basically deconstruct Zune's corpus and try to compose their own Zune-style tracks. They have a bunch of material out there characterizing his music better than I can. I'm not a music theory guy, but I just try to get along. And we're not going to talk about instrumentation at all as much as I would love to. Let's talk about some of these events, however. Starting with Comiket. Justin, you've been to Comiket.
Yeah, and I mentioned a little bit before the panel, but Comiket is big. 500 to 600,000 people big. It is like we were talking about earlier, a bunch of doujin artists, doujin musicians get together and have their own booths, and there are so many of these people that they're not there for all 3 days of comic market. They rotate out. So when I went on the day when I knew that Touhou music creators would be there.
That's day 2, right?
Right.
Hell yeah, Saturday.
And there are comic market has evolved beyond just fan works. Companies go there and sell special goods, but for the Touhou music creators, there are people. I was able to meet a few of the people I was listening to all of the tracks of and get a few of their autographs, and it was a very cool and very unique experience. Comic market is definitely a place you want to go to once and then probably never again, unless you really, really like big crowds. It is managed extremely well. You have people lining up for hours to buy the new doujinshi by their favorite R18 artist, and that is very respectable. I did not do that. I did not wait in any lines for any Touhou music or R18 doujins. I just went to the circles that were available, and it just so happened that I picked a good year to go. I saw a lot of circles I wanted to, and like we were talking about earlier, that was even for some circles now, because a lot of them are defunct, that was the only way to get official versions of the music. A lot of the stuff we listened to in the past, and a lot of the stuff we listen to now for Touhou specifically, is rips on different people's YouTube channels.
Oh, yes.
It's not technically official, and that's why I think they eventually caved and they got rid of the idea that they needed to have it be not online, and a lot of circles started to be like, okay, we want to put our stuff online, so at least we're not getting a lot of benefit, but we're getting some of the benefit now.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about that discourse in just a moment. There is also, of course, Reitaisai. Have you been to Reitaisai?
Unfortunately not. I would love to go to Reitaisai.
I want to go to Reitaisai. It sounds a little bit less insane than Comiket, and also just really cool. And this is a Touhou-focused event. The first one was run in 2004, not in Tokyo Big Sight, did not start there immediately. It took them a couple of years to sort of get there. It's sort of walk a weird line. They're not really official, but they're official, essentially. Jin does use that as a platform to sort of talk about stuff a lot of the time. A lot of music circles go there. Sometimes they also go to M3, but let's move on a little bit and talk about some of these in-person concerts. This is Touhou Carnivalize Free from 2006. The first one was in 2005. And as you can see, even in the very early stages of the Touhou Doujin music scene, there was a healthy community around this stuff. This is Beat Mario, Coale and Create, on stage doing interactions with the audience. In a second, they're going to get to a different song here that is very interesting to talk about. Yeah, here is the original instrumental version of Help Me Eri. And the interesting thing about this is that it started as an instrumental version. He took it to these in-person events, and he had this interaction with the crowd. The crowd were doing like these yakai chants, going Erin, Erin, Rin, Erin, stuff like that. And that was what inspired him to make the vocal version. So there is this interplay between the analog aspect of the scene and sort of what we experience on the internet that is a little bit difficult to grasp unless you're plugged into the Japanese side. This is Beat Mario's future wife, Amine, in Kachuli cosplay, singing Drizzly Rain. Is she a good vocalist? Not really. Is she cute? Oh god, yes. And this is during a period when the idea of a vocal Touhou arrangement was a novelty in and of itself. So that there was value in this alone. So if you go onto YouTube and you see people tagging things like Touhou vocal, and you're like, well, what the hell does that mean? Is it mallcore? Is it vocal house? Is it a magical? Who the hell knows what a Touhou vocal is? But that comes from a period when the vocals themselves were a draw. So speaking of the early days of the Touhou Doujin music scene, where did all this stuff come from?
Good choice for a song.
Earwood is going to throw you for a loop in a second. this isn't actually Tori no Uta. This is a parody of Tori no Uta. That is actually Aya's theme.
Oh my god. We need to stop Doujin artists.
Okay, so yeah, it was a little bit technologically determinate. As for when it happened, when it did, a couple of things had to happen. First of all, you had to have desktop computers that were powerful enough to run digital audio workstations, but also cheap enough that hobbyists could buy them and not break the bank. And you also had to have the CD, the burnable CD. Because a lot of people, they will just burn the CDs themselves. And even if they don't, they can just go to the replicator and say, hey, here are my master files, give me 400 discs. And the replicator will come back and they'll say, here are your 400 discs, and they'll be in a nice convenient box that they can either put in a car or take on the train to Tokyo Big Sight. And that is a hell of a lot easier than cheaper than doing like vinyl or audio cassettes. So you had to have the technological infrastructure, and you had to have these burnable CDs. These come together to form something that is an English term, but I've only ever heard it used in Japanese, DTM, desktop music. And a couple of things come from this that are not Touhou. There are a couple of different sources of this initial cadre. For instance, there are a lot of people who are doing arrangements of music from visual novels. The early 2000s was the era of the Nakige, the tearjerker game. These games like Konami, Manad, Air, stuff like that. But also other visual novels like Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night and Tight Noon, and also games like Ragnarok Online, Final Fantasy. People were doing the arrangements of these video games, and then they were like, hey, Touhou is pretty cool, and they started making Touhou stuff, and they never really looked back. And that's sort of interesting, because it occurred to me when I was putting together this panel that Touhou didn't kill necessarily other game arrangement scenes, but they did certainly monopolize a lot of that space, because in 2014, 2016, when Kantai Collection, the Ship Girls game, was getting really popular, a couple of these circles went to make Kantai Collection albums. And some of them were even pretty good. I like the Tokyo Active Beats Kantai Collection album. But they did that, and then they went right back to Touhou. And there are a couple of reasons, as you were talking about earlier, why this might be the case. Yeah, sorry. I have no idea what the audio is like for you guys. Alright, got it.
But the music is so much prettier than our voices.
Absolutely. So yeah, a couple other things to quickly talk about. There's also J-core, Japanese hardcore, that evolved alongside the Touhou Doujin music scene. There's a Venn diagram there of people who are important in both. For instance, Red Alice does a lot of work in both, and they were the people who helped set up some of these early events, like the Touhou Carnivalize concerts. Because they had put something together for their J-core scene, and they were like, hey, we know these people at this venue, let's do something for Touhou, and then they made it a reality. And that's just sort of the personal connection nature of the Touhou Doujin music scene. It's all about these personal connections. Also really important to quickly note is Beatmania, or Bamani, which is this Japanese rhythm game that has a lot of music associated with it. People were doing arrangements of those as well. And so the people who were initially doing this work in the Touhou Doujin music scene would generally come from one or two of these sources, usually both.
So did we specify, like, what was it about Touhou specifically that captured a grassroots movement of, like, extremely dedicated fans to the point where they would return to Touhou from, like, there's the thing that I've thought about as, like, a casual fan is, Touhou is popular, and it's always been popular, but there's always been a discussion, especially when stuff like Azure Lane and Kantai Collection came along, of the Touhou killer. Everybody's like, well, no one's going to make Touhou stuff anymore, but it just kept coming back, and, you call it a grassroots movement, but it's the question then arises, like, what made Touhou stand out specifically from all of these other games?
Just the soundtrack, both in the nature of the soundtrack and in the, I guess, number of songs, and in the fact that people, they just have all of these friends, and they are like encouraged to keep on doing this Touhou stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's fan pressure, because circles do unpopular stuff all the time. They don't care. They don't have to worry about, like, this being part of their revenue for the most part. So it really is just the nature of the thing. I guess it is sort of an open question.
Yeah.
I don't really want to talk about us all that much. We know about us already, for the most part. So we, of course, are getting into things around the same time as everybody else, but we are getting into the online side of it, which is very important. But it is not the entire picture. But another way of saying that we got into it on the online side is to say that we are downstream. This entire panel only exists because of copious amounts of piracy. I don't know if any of you guys remember it. When I was getting into this stuff in 2011, I'd go onto like Doujin Style, which is his forum, or onto JP, the Otaku Culture Board of 4chan, on like a Friday night at midnight, which means it would be Saturday afternoon in Japan on Touhou Day at Comic-Cat. And like already people would be posting stuff that people like bought in the morning and they went back to their hotel or to their home and they immediately ripped it and posted it. Either people posting their own rips or people posting rips from like Chinese sites or from, there were a couple of private Japanese trackers that people were using, although I think those dried up a little bit in the early days after that. And so from then it went on to YouTube and it went on to Gensokyo Radio and stuff. So I have to ask, Justin, how did you usually listen to Touhou music and how do you nowadays?
Yeah, it was a similar story. I did not have the same. I don't still have the same kind of expertise for navigating like Japanese internet, but it was scraping through to see where I could get the rips from, listening to a lot of Gensokyo Radio in the background. And then some, YouTube playlists, YouTube compilations. For those who are familiar with the saga of Notori Kapashiro, they were a YouTuber who has been killed and resurrected. I guess they have their copies of all the stuff somewhere, but they keep coming back, and YouTube keeps banning them because a lot of them circles don't care as much, but it only takes one circle to like harass you on YouTube for your channel to be like completely terminated.
Yeah, there are people who care a lot and people who care not at all. And this was apparent even, the earliest I can see discourse about this on the Japanese side, like between circles, is 2012, but of course I can only see the internet side. I'm not going to like the Nomikai, obviously, where people are shit talking this stuff. So I don't know what the early discussions were like, but even in 2012, like people were talking about like deciding, hey, we're hobbyists, it doesn't really matter. This is how people like popularize their music anyway, and these are like overseas people, so they don't really have access to these events. And on the other hand, you just have people who are like, no, this is super disrespectful that people are uploading full-length songs. And like you have Linjin of Zadokain, who is super litigious about taking down stuff, and then people like Minoshima Masayoshi of Outside Miria Records, who are a lot more forgiving. And of course, we also start participating in the scene in the early 2010s, but we will talk about that in just a little bit if I don't talk too long during this part. I'll quickly just touch on some of the more recent era. But more recently, the online space has been an official space for doujin activity. And this starts really, I can give you an exact date really, when this really kicks off, and that is October 2018, because that is when Touhou Doujin Ongaku Ditsu gets started. That is literally just Touhou Doujin Music Distribution. It's a consortium that basically acts as like a way to facilitate Circle's ability to put their music on like Spotify and the iTunes store. And so why that era? Well, as Justin was talking about earlier, there had to be a little bit of a cultural discussion about whether posting stuff online made it commercial or not, because you're in the same venue as a commercial work. People eventually decide no, that's not the case, but you had to have that discussion first. And to this day, like Comic-Con and Data site, they have like specific sections of their like rules and codes that sort of specify this. And also circles will voluntarily like put in like a period of like a couple of months to a year between when something releases at like an event and when they'll put it online. So people do still care about separating the two arenas. Very quickly before we move on, I will note one show that I really like, Kono Touhou Arenji ga Sugoi, which is part of the Touhou Station sort of program. It's sort of part of this new digital era. This is a program that's based off of the Kono Ranome ga Sugoi awards that basically pick out these like popular, not popular, but it was basically people from a Touhou Doujin music scene coming together and like picking out a bunch of songs that they think are cool, especially from circles that began their activity in like the last 5 years. Because again, a lot of the most popular circles, they predate 2012. They've been around a while, so it's good to highlight a lot of these newcomers, and they are quite sensitive to it. Definitely look up that program if you're curious about some of the new stuff that is coming out. Kono Touhou arenji ga sugoi. This Touhou arrangement is awesome, is what it means in Japanese. So this is the part of the panel where we do show and tell, and we talk about a bunch of circles. So the first one I want to talk about real quickly is Ultrameria Records, run by Minoshima Masayoshi. Talked about them before, Bad Apple fame. They are among the earliest and also among the most popular, most notable of the circles of the Touhou Doujin music scene. They have origins in both Bemani scene and also they did a key arrangement album, like one of these visual novel arrangement albums, before their first Touhou album, which was Against Perfect Cherry Blossom in 2004. This example right now is an arrangement of Deaf to All But the Song from his second album, which has a long name, which I'm not going to say. It's like the Touhou Doujin Arrangement Collection Volume 2 Mai, something like that. And this song is Piano House. Piano House has a different meaning in Japanese. It's not sort of the Italian ravey stuff from the early 90s that we know as Piano House. It's more of a laid-back sort of thing. During this period, he's doing like a lot of tech house and a lot of trance. Later in 2005, he will start working with a vocalist named Matsunaga Ayaka. This is her singing Force of 60 Years from, forget the album, A something or other. She was a famous cosplayer at the time. As you can hear, she is not a particularly great vocalist. But her vocals do sort of lend to the atmosphere of the song. I like the language sort of feel of it. But it is notable that very soon afterwards he would start working with another vocalist, Kasi Nomiko. Nomiko of Bad Apple fame. This is her singing Shanghai Alice in 1884. Similar range to Matsunaga Ayaka, similar qualities, but a little more technical. And she is, of course, the vocalist of Bad Apple. She is singing lyrics actually written by Matsunaga Ayaka before she left Ultrameria Records. And they're pretty good lyrics, I have to say. In Japanese, they do have a good sense of poesy. In summer 2007 is when Bad Apple comes out on an album called Love Light. And the thing about Love Light is that overall, as an album, it's pretty mid. This is very much Minoshima in his fucking around with sample packs period. Although I do have a personal affection for it. But around this time is when he goes, Ultrameria Records undergoes a little bit of a transformation. His songs get a lot more polished. Minoshima's songs get a lot more polished. His sound starts to change a little bit, and he starts working with a lot more vocalists and arrangers. This is a song arranged by Sirfit with vocals by Ayakura Mei, who will definitely come up later in this panel. She works with a whole bunch of different circles. And Sirfit is one of those artists who appeared on Ultrameria Records album, and then that inspired them to sort of go spin off their own circle. And we will also talk about Sirfit's circle.
But we kind of touch on here that we didn't really get into too much is that there's a lot of collaboration among these circles.
Yeah.
They're not like, just because you're in one circle doesn't exclude you from working with another circle.
Yeah, absolutely. So this period, about 2008, 2011, is my favorite period of Ultrameria Records. It ends in summer 2011 with an album called Haunted Dance Hall. And Haunted Dance Hall, in terms of content, not that different from what came before on, for instance, Plastic World, but it is different in two ways. First of all, it's a continuous mix. Each song leads into the next. Second, the focus is more on what is popular at like clubs and stuff. And this marks a distinct change in Alcimmeria Records' direction that will continue on for about a decade. Because for the entire decade of the 2010s, Minashima will do almost absolutely nothing but release dancehall albums and pop culture albums. And pop culture is another series he started that's basically what is sort of popular like on the airwaves and on Beatport and such. This is right now Maniacal Degree, a song that I rather like from Decade of Exposed, one of the rare non-dancehall albums from this period. He does have a little bit of an evolution over this period. There are things to talk about. It's not that there are decent albums, there are cool songs, but man, there is not all that much to talk about here. This is one of the high points of this period. For one of the low points, just as an illustration, this is a big room house song called Temper from Pop Culture 3. Drop the kazoo, bro. Why was Big Room House a thing?
I think this is what we kind of see a few big circles do something similar to this, where they have their one thing that they do like yearly or for release, and then I think it's very pretentious of me to say that they're coasting off their reputation, but like without knowing the exact words to put it into, they're like they do the one thing and then they're like, here's your slot, piggies. Yeah. This is your meal for the next year. But it's understandable because a lot of them, like we were talking about earlier, this is not their living, but they want to give something to the fans still.
Yeah. Minashima enters another era in 2022 where he stops doing pop culture and dancehall albums. He starts doing essentially what are LPs, so fewer albums. His sound changes a little bit back into a more trance-like sound. This is Enduring from Horizontal Connections, probably my favorite song of this period. I'd like this particular period of Alcimmeria Records. I think it is a big improvement. But that's where we are right now. Let's talk about some other circles. Justin, tell me about Akatsuki Records.
So I basically gave my spiel earlier, and we want to get through as many of these as we can, so I won't go too much into it. But Stack Bros are still pumping them out, and they just released the song I think a month ago, Yukari-centered song. They have look at the years here. They've been around for a very long time, but they are.
Pre-2012.
Midnight Parade is Rumia focused song. It is the music video is very cute.
Who is a character from Embodiment of Scarlet Devil.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And she eats humans, but she can create a bubble of darkness around herself. She cannot see in that darkness. So it is very much like cute little girl sees you and then tries to literally eat you alive if you're a human. But yeah, they're all pretty character-focused songs that they're coming out with, and I would recommend checking them out on Spotify, YouTube. Yeah.
All right. Let's do the quick version of Shibayan Records. So Shibayan Records is probably my favorite electronic music circle. Not mostly known for that these days. They really have three periods. The first period is their noisy electro house period. This is very Justice inspired, if you know the French house group Justice. They have a couple albums that are great during this period. It starts with Kiseki Impulse in 2009, Otome Cute, So Materialize, Kokoro Vibration. Just a lot of really great albums. The song that you're hearing right now is called Myon 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 Myon. This is part of a series of songs that are based off of samples of a vocalist called 3L, Ampo Sayuri, who is probably my favorite vocalist of the Touhou Doujin music scene. You're not really hearing her right now. But it's basically taking a sample of her saying Myon in C and doing different songs based off of it. And they're all great. And he adds like a Myon for each version of it he does. And I think the last one was Myon 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 from... was that Adrestea? Yeah, I think that was Adrestea. Within the early 2010s, he has a little bit of a shift where he gets a little bit more into the retro side of the electro house genre, which is retro genre in general, but he starts leading into that more. A lot of his best songs are on other people's albums. This is Theme from Blossom, which is a Seraphit album. And this transformation into his third period is complete around late 2013, early 2014 with an album called Retro Future Girls. This is Tobidase Bankiki, which is from Retro Future Girls. And it's probably his second most famous song. And this song, this album sort of is his first album from, I call it the new disco period, where he sort of moves away from the noisy aspect of like electro house into sort of this more, something more like this. Vocals by Sakoe Nachi, it's just a very cute song. This song is another one that sort of broke containment. It's most associated with like a gif of Megami from Konosuba. But both fans of his electro house period and his new disco period are shit out of luck. Because from 2015 onward, it's nothing but bossa nova all the time. So he is making these bossa nova albums basically nonstop throughout the period. His first one was Apukunan de Felicidade from 2012. And every year he comes out with a Touhou Bossa Nova album that has a couple songs by him, a bunch by other arrangers. This is Majo no Yakusoku from Touhou Bossa Nova 10. And I like his Bossa Nova work. I wish he would do other things more often. But there's not much to talk about here.
Yeah, let's try to get to the speed through some of these last ones that we have in the last 4 minutes here.
Yeah, okay. We don't need to talk about my Romo.
Yeah, the Zytokin, J-pop. Some of these ones that I am much more into were just kind of generically slotted into vocal J-pop, J-rock, what have you. Nana Takahashi, great vocalist, one of my favorites of all time, along with 3L. Yeah, Ice Cream, pretty famous one by her. And especially at the bottom there, they had a lot of collabs with a lot of different circles who are very famous in their own right. It's very cool to hear how indie artists like that can influence each other, or doujin artists like that.
Yeah. Let's motor right along. Talk briefly about Demetori. Okay, awesome. Got some Demetori fans in here. There are a bunch of Touhou metal circles I could talk about. Demetori is crazy. This is my favorite song from an album called Naru Pasana Pundarika. This is View of the River Styx, which opens with this awesome like compound meter before going into sort of the main section. It's just a very laid-back song. Their most famous song is also from the same album. That is Nuclear Fusion, which is an arrangement of Nuclear Fusion. And they just have a great sense of like different rhythms. They're two brothers, just two brothers. Tokunan, who is the guitarist and bassist, and Kyu Hoji, who does the technical stuff in drum programming. And together they make some very sophisticated tracks. Awesome metal circle.
And on the other end of the spectrum, we have A1.
Yeah.
All Eurobeat all the time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, if you need a Eurobeat fix, any of the albums are great stuff. Odyssey Eurobeat, one of my favorite artists. She streams quite a bit. Her old stuff's great. Her new stuff's great. Give her a listen. We can speed through. We can just keep going.
Yeah. Let me briefly touch on Jiao Yetong before we leave. Better known by the guy behind it, RD Sounds. Jiao Yetong is a very difficult circle to talk about because what's interesting about them is that they have these very complex concept albums with a literary character to them. So let's talk about the easy part first. They are essentially a prog rock circle. They like orchestral elements of their arrangements as well. They experiment. They're essentially prog rock. They work a lot with vocalists like Merami Pop and Nayuta. Nayuta's voice might sound a little bit familiar if you're a fan of like early Japanese hololive. What do I mean by that? I don't know. It's a mystery. Speaking of mysteries, let's talk about Q, which is an example of one of those complex concept albums I was talking about. So Q is an album about two characters who did not appear in the games. They are Motoori Kusuzu, who is a yokai librarian, and Hirano Akyu, who is the chronicler of Gensokyo. And her thing is that basically her line, they basically die when they're like 12, but they carry on the memories of the last person in the line. And so they're good buddies. And I know, I'll wrap this up real quick. So basically, it's just each song. Okay, so basically, she has these unpublished manuscripts when she dies, and each one of they're murder mysteries based off of characters that she knows from around Gensokyo, and they're basically Aki writing about herself, and it's Kosuzu has like a forward to each song, basically saying what she thinks Aki was trying to say about herself, and she's usually a little bit wrong, usually a little bit right. She has highlighted these red parts of these absolutely beautiful lyric booklets for what she thinks is important about them, and basically trying to grapple with what to do with these manuscripts, how to best treat her legacy. Already sounds very sophisticated circle. I have a lot more to say about them, but we are out of time.
Yeah, we could keep going for a long time, but we're out of time, unfortunately.
We did our best.
Yeah. If you want to keep talking about it, we'll be outside. We'll be up here. We'll be outside. Catch us around the con. Sorry if we didn't get to your favorite circle or favorite track. There's just a lot to talk about. Thank you all for coming so much, though. We appreciate it.
Thank you.